For some 40 years, filmmakers have been adapting films from Stephen King's seemingly endless works of fiction. King's work has provided the source for some of the greatest films, horror or other, and you can't underestimate the influence the master writer has had on Hollywood. Recently, King has been popping up everywhere. A feature film adaptation of It the Clown has just been announced, while the long-mooted cinematic version of The Dark Tower finally seems to be moving ahead, adding some phenomenal star power in Idris, Elba and Matthew McConaughey. So, with King adaptations still going strong, we've decided to rank what we believe to be the 10 greatest Stephen King movies. Before we begin, just to clarify, we are ranking them purely as movies, not adaptations, just so there's no confusion. Whereas an adaptation may be measured on how faithful it is to the source material, our ranking will be purely based on cinematic merit. On with the list. One of the most underrated King films, it may not live up to the other movie set in a mysterious hotel on this list, but 1408 is an effective suspense-driven thriller buoyed by a couple of strong performances from Samuel L. Jackson and John Cusack. 1408 focuses more on psychological thrills than outright gore, and what we get is a genuinely creepy, thought-provoking movie that deserves far more appreciation than it's received.
Gerald Olin, manager of the Dolphin.
If I can just get the key to 1408.
In the 95 years of the hotel's existence, there have been 56 deaths in 1408.
56.
No one's ever lasted more than an hour.
One of King's most celebrated novels, Pet Sematary, the film perhaps doesn't live up to the eerie brilliance of what was on the page, but it's still an undoubtedly horrific movie. It features, among other things, a murderous toddler who will stay with you in your nightmares for too long, and who can forget the scene with Gage under the bed with the scalpel. It's more than a gore fest though, handling the novel's mature themes of death rather well, making it slightly better than your usual King fodder.
I dreamed he got hit by a car and you and Mr. Crandall buried him in the pet cemetery.
What did we do tonight, Judd?
What we did, Lois, was a secret.
This faithful and convincing adaptation stars Christopher Walken as Johnny Smith, a man who emerges from a coma after 5 years to find that he had psychic powers, which are both a blessing and a curse. His powers are soon put to the test in what transpires to be an accomplished, well-paced psychological thriller, helped by the astute direction of gross-out King David Cronenberg.
I was there, I saw him. Put your hand on the scanning screen and you'll go down in history with me. I saw his face. I stood there. I did nothing. Johnny!
The adaptation of one of King's most well-known short stories fell to the trusty hands of Frank Darabont, who captured a truly spine-tingling horror story while taking some creative liberties in the process. Raw and visceral, The Mist also features a shattering performance from the always excellent Marcia Gay Harden, and that ambitious, devastating final sequence is definitely one of the most harrowing moments in a King film, even though King himself originally penned a much more positive ending. However, the author actually loved Darabont's personal ending, so the fan hate was ultimately invalid.
What's going on? It's death.
Stand By Me was significant because it was the first time a movie audience got to see King's non-horror work on the screen, ultimately growing to become one of the greatest coming-of-age films ever made. Thanks to the masterful direction of Rob Reiner and impressive work from a young cast, Stand By Me is a funny and moving movie that also forms a key part of River Phoenix's cinematic legacy. Dealing with complex issues like death, friendship and parental abuse, there's still time for a couple of gross-out moments. Leeches, that's all we're saying.
Oh shit, Chris. Oh shit, man.
Carrie was the very first novel King wrote and was also the first adaptation. For many, it set the standard for what was to come, and in a way it does, even if it is dated. Brian De Palma put his own unique stamp on it, and Sissy Spacek's central performance is utterly mesmerising. Like we said at the start of the video, if we're talking about adaptations, Carrie would have been higher up, but there are definitely better King films than this. That ending was something pretty special though. An absorbing, powerful experience, The Green Mile is simply one of the most emotional films of all time. Once again helmed by Frank Darabont, many complained that the 3-hour runtime felt like a life sentence, but there's no denying the outstanding performances from Tom Hanks, Michael Clarke Duncan and Sam Rockwell here. Whether critics like it or not, The Green Mile remains one of the most popular and successful King adaptations of all time, and is one of our favourites.
You think if a man sincerely repents on what he done wrong, that he might get to go back to the time that was happiest for him and live there forever. Would that be what heaven's like?
I just about believe that very thing.
While The Green Mile is great, it's definitely no Shawshank. A frequent populist choice as the greatest film of all time, The Shawshank Redemption has the distinction of being the highest rated film ever on IMDb's hallowed Top 250, which gives you an indication of just how this film impacted audiences. Uplifting, heartfelt and endlessly rewatchable, Shawshank features Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman at the top of their acting games, and gave us one of the most beautifully heartwarming endings of all time. Anyone that doesn't like The Shawshank Redemption as pure cinematic enjoyment simply doesn't have a heart. There, we said it.
There are places in the world that aren't made out of stone. There's something inside that they can't get to, that they can't touch. It's yours.
What are you talking about?
Hope.
Suffice to say, Kathy Bates' Oscar-winning performance as Annie Wilkes makes this film. Something of a poster movie for dangerously obsessed, increasingly deranged fans gone wrong, Misery never loses its feeling of claustrophobia and helplessness, as James Caan's handicapped writer struggles to escape the clutches of his #1 fan. Misery is easily one of the scariest King books, and Rob Reiner's film manages to successfully capture the taut and frightening narrative, building it up to a blood-soaked finale.
You have a compound fracture of the tibia in both legs, and the fibula in the right leg is fractured too.
Guess it was kind of a miracle you finding me.
In a way, I was following you. Seeing as how I'm your #1 fan and all, I've read everything of yours.
You're very kind.
You might have predicted it, but we had to go for it. King notoriously hated Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining so much that he wrote a teleplay for his own miniseries that was nowhere near as popular. But the fact is that it remains the definitive scary movie. It is ironic that the best King movie is also one of the worst adaptations, but come on, this is a stunning work of art in its own right. An uncompromising deep dive into the mental unravelling of Jack Torrance, played unforgettably by Jack Nicholson, The Shining is a masterpiece of cinema and essential viewing for any horror fan, whether you're Team King or Team Kubrick.
You did this to me, didn't you?
I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
That's our top 10 Stephen King movies. You're probably seething with rage right now, so make sure to vent in the comments with your own top 10. As always, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more videos. Click left to check out upcoming movie sequels that may surprise you, or click right to watch the 10 most shocking Oscar snubs ever.